Since I caught up to 911 this last weekend, my brain has been in a near constant loop of theories. And I'm not even gonna lie to you. Let's cut straight to the chase. It's all about what they are going to do with Eddie Diaz's storyline. Secondary, what they're gonna do with Buck's storyline, and let's just be honest, Buddy Cannon 2025. Like, I'm not even gonna sit here and pretend like, oh, I'm not like other girls. Like, I have a unique take. I surely don't. Because my eyes were open when I was watching 911, and I could have watched that show in a vacuum, and I promise you, I would have come to the same conclusions. There's just no way that they're layering on this much heavy handed metaphor with Eddie specifically, and it not be leading to some sort of sexuality realization, unless this is just egregious queerbait or just bad writing. And I'm gonna be honest, it being a Ryan Murphy Brad Falchuk production, like, you can have your opinions on them, but given their track record, I just don't think it's either. And Tim Minear is a great showrunner and writer. I just don't think with the three of them at the helm, that's what we're dealing with here. I could be wrong. I could eat my words, and if I do, I will come on here and I will eat my words. But for now, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that this is intentional, because you cannot show me a water versus juice metaphor and then double down on it with the priest and be like, but that didn't mean what it obviously you all thought it meant. Like, juice, the fruity option, water, the safe, plain, reliable option. He chooses water but was considering the juice. The priest clocks him, gives him a monologue on it. He's like, oh, but I'm straight. And the priest is like, okay. The whole thing was just like, I didn't even have to dig. It was just handed to me on a platter. And then they said, well, if you didn't get the juice water metaphor, how about the mustache metaphor? In which the LAFD doesn't allow beards, which is a double meaning. And then during Eddie's time on his own away from Christopher, who he otherwise lives for, is forced to have some self-exploration. He grows a mustache because he can't grow a beard. He's not allowed to. And then eventually we see him shave that off after he contemplates what the priest tells him. And we see him having the most exuberant joy we have seen this character experience. Dancing, like smiling, like giggling. Like, it was the most free we've ever seen him. There's like 8 metaphors in there. Like, it's like, if you missed one, did you miss the other 7 kind of a thing? It's like, what is going on? And then Buck walks in, hot off the heels of his breakup. No words are spoken. They sit on the couch. Like, it's... Guys. Like, it's you could literally eliminate, like, 80% of it, and the remaining 20% would be still very obvious. While this isn't explicitly supported in the text, it's not supported in the text. I'm of the belief that Tommy knew something was up, and I don't know if he knows to what extent or if it's requited or what, but there's no way that man was friends with both of them and dated one of them for 6 months and didn't clock something. I mean, on day 1, before he started dating Buck, before he even knew Buck was bi, before they kissed, he was like, you wanted my attention? If you go back to that episode in season 7, let's say you take 5 scenes with Buck and Eddie, or Buck, his attention is entirely on Eddie for 4 of them. That is the most classic case of projection I've ever seen. It can't even be, they're not even being subtle with it. It's not subtle at all. But I don't need to tell you all the many obvious ways they have hinted at this potential pairing down the road. Let's talk about what my theories are of what's to come in season 8B of 911. And I do have some thoughts on this. First thing I want to say is notice how carefully and how slowly they're moving through this plot line with Eddie. Think back to Buck. When they made Buck bi, so to speak, although they haven't really said those words, I don't think, in the show, but he's bi. It was self-contained to an episode. Everything, let's take the longing glances and the, insinuation of Buddy out of the mix completely. Delete it. And just take Buck's individual storyline, okay? There is no indication that that is going to happen until, the beginning of that episode. And it unfolds quickly. And you're like, whoa. They didn't even pepper it with metaphor for many, many episodes or seasons before. They just went right for it. So it's fascinating to me that they are like slow burning Eddie's storyline, which leads me to believe, maybe erroneously, but I think that means this is going to be a huge like deal. Like, not only do I think this is going to be a pivotal changing and evolution of this character, but I think it's going to be leading to something enormous, which I do think is buddy canon. And I think they're paying extra special attention to this to make sure they do this right, because this is a very fraught storyline. You have someone who is potentially an extremely closeted, thinks they're straight, homosexual male, who was married to a woman and had a child with them and has dated only women up to this point, and is deeply repressed and also has a religious trauma. Like, that is a lot of layers to get under, and you want to tell that story right. With Buck, what was great is that he didn't have all that baggage, so for him to like come to a sexuality realization was like a little bit, but like he didn't face a ton of resistance with it. He was like, oh, okay, like, I guess this is happening. Like, it's Buck. Like, he was a little worried about what people would think, but everyone was very welcoming and kind, and then everyone just treated him normally, and it was great. Like, he didn't have, like, a family to contend with, he didn't have, like, religious trauma to deal with, a child, a past spouse, none of that. So with Buck, it was a very quick thing. That is not going to be the case with Eddie. That being said, though, I think when we finally get to this point in the story, it is going to unfold quickly. I think it's going to be, like, one thing after another. It's going to be... there's a bit more lead up with Eddie, but I do think, like, as soon as we get a whiff of it in an episode, I think it's going to happen in either that episode or the very next one. Like, 911 does like to barrel through things to a degree. It being an ensemble show, they got to get to the other stuff as well. So it's like, I really truly don't think we're going to be waiting for this like a whole nother season. Like, I think it's happening in the second half of season 8. Now, how they go about it, couple different ways could happen. I have been thinking, okay, it might be interesting if there is maybe like a simultaneous feelings realization. Although I don't know if that's excellent storytelling. So I'm like trying to think of it from a writer's perspective of like what would be compelling story to tell on TV. Maybe Eddie has a fully separate realization, separate from Buck, and Buck is kind of clueless until the end. Maybe with Eddie leaving, Buck has the realization. But separately, Eddie has a whole realization about sexuality that has nothing to do with Buck. Maybe Eddie's sexuality realization is tied to his feelings with Buck. Maybe he realizes he's in love with Buck and then realizes he's gay. Do you see all the different combinations we could do this? Like, it's actually crazy. The one theory I saw today, though, which I did not come up with, I've seen a few people talk about this. Apparently, there's like a stunt double credited for one of the upcoming episodes for Eddie, and people are like, what if Eddie is in like dire peril and is like in an emergency in Texas, and Buck has to come to Texas to like take care of Christopher? Because the will wouldn't be relevant unless Eddie was dead, and they're not gonna kill off Eddie, so I don't think it's that, but like, what if Buck is like, I've had enough. I gotta go to Texas. I gotta get Christopher. I gotta see Eddie. Like, we don't know. That could happen. And then they could, I don't know. They could do that. It's very dramatic. That would be good for TV, personally, I think. I do, though, think separate from all of that, Eddie is definitely going to have a reckoning with his parents because they've crossed some major boundaries. And I think he needs to repair his relationship with Christopher. And I think all of this is going to happen. Like, I really do. I think it's going to be a big Eddie second half of the season. I could be wrong. I could very much be wrong. I do think they're gearing up for some big stuff with him, though. And I do think Buck is eventually going to be involved, and I do think it's going to eventually lead to them being together. Now, I don't know if that's going to be, like, they're going to lead up to it and then, like, cliffhanger us at the end of the season. They don't seem to cliffhanger a lot at the end of seasons, so maybe it happens before the end of the season. I don't know. But truly, I don't think any of you are crazy for thinking that this is going to happen. I've never seen TV be so heavy-handed with how obvious it is in my life, and I've watched a lot of like queerbait media. So just know that you guys aren't delusional. Either they're evil or you guys are right. It's one of the two.